Welcome csc200 to ex6-7, and it's called 6-7 because it's kind of broken up in different parts. Exercise 6 is going to be creating a brand new database from scratch, which we'll be doing right now. And then with 7, two parts of it. One will be just taking information and displaying it to a page from a form. And then eventually we're going to be taking that form information and letting you input information into a form so you could communicate with the database and do that through a web page instead of doing it all through phpMyAdmin. But we will have to create a database in phpMyAdmin, so let's do that first. Let's go to Window and go to New Terminal, and in our bash kind of terminal here we're going to connect to our phpMyAdmin. So I'm going to do phpMyAdmin -control-ctl space install and hit enter or return. And if you see starting MySQL, that's good. And it just shows you your username here. Now you'll need that when you log in, but you can click on this link to get to the phpMyAdmin. Just choose open. It'll open up in a new tab, and that's what you want. And we're going to create a new database called ex6-spongebob. Now you could do that just by going to databases and just saying create database. But we're going to try to do it with some SQL. We're going to start learning to use SQL more because that's what we're going to have to use through our web page if we want to make changes to our database, because we're not always going to, if a user comes to our website and needs to do something, get added to a database, they won't be able to come in here. So we're going to have to use code. So we'll get used to using some SQL code. Take a little getting used to, but we'll practice with it. What we'll do is we'll create our database. We'll go into SQL, and I'll just look for, there's a whole section here, create DB. It's real easy. And you just create database username. Here it is. So I'll just highlight that and copy it. And I'll go in here and I'll go to my SQL section and I'll paste that, except we're not going to call it testDB. We'll call it ex6-spongebob, and it has a semicolon at the end. So we're going to do that first, and we'll just hit go, and that should create our database. Keep in mind, if you ever mess something up or screw something up, you could always go back to databases and check your database and hit drop. Drop is the term for deleting it. We're not going to drop it right now, but we're going to go back to, we'll go to SQL right now because we're going to create a table. Now, typically when you create a table, you'd go to your databases and you'd go to SpongeBob. And if there's no table, it would tell you to create a table, how many columns. But what we're going to do is we're going to use SQL to do that, to create a table. And we'll just learn how to do that. So we'll go to the W3 Schools SQL, and they have create table. So they help you through it here. And I'll look for the one that has some code. And I'll use this one, even though we're going to change these column names. So I'll highlight this. But we are going to create table. But we're just going to change some terms that are being used here. I'm going to go back to SQL, and I'm going to paste this in. What I might recommend to get in the habit of it would be always kind of copying. I guess you don't have to copy this because we copied it from there, but before you hit go, always copy the code so that you can always paste it back. Some of the other SQLs that I've used have a thing that kind of brings it back, but this one does not. So, and I'm not sure if I just don't know where that is, or I'm just not used to this version through Cloud 9, but we might want to do that just to be safe. So anyway, we're going to create a table. We're going to call it characters, and we'll do everything lowercase. So we'll try to do everything lowercase, no capital letters. Even ID we'll keep lowercase. We'll just do, we're going to start with first. We'll do first name because when we create it, it's easier to do the first name because we know the characters by their first name a little better. And then we'll just do first, last. We're going to do species. We'll do gender. And notice there's no comma here because it's the last one, but we're putting another, so I'm going to put a comma, and I'll put city, and I'll do varchar just like it has, and 255. Now you don't have to have 250. That's the default, but you could change these if you could change them to 30. I don't know if it really matter for what we're doing. If you had a gigantic database, that might matter, but we don't, so I don't know if it's a big deal. Gender doesn't really, we're going to change gender anyway. And varchar, we'll put 30 for that too. And we're going to put a default in here for city of Bikini Bottom so we don't have to keep entering that. And so some of these things we're going to change here. So we're going to put an auto increment for ID. It's going to be our primary ID. A couple things we're going to put in here. So before you just hit go or do anything yet, we're going to go to W3 Schools. And down here, you're going to see some things here like auto increment. All in this SQL database, you'll find information here. And I'm going to go to first auto increment and scroll down because you can see it has some information here. ID int, we have that, but it has not null auto increment. So why don't we just copy that and put that in, and then notice it also has primary key. So we're going to do primary key and then also not null auto increment. So we're going to put those things in there. So I'll just copy that, and I'm going to put it right over top of the comma, because the comma is at the end, not in between anything. So ID int not null auto increment, and then there was a thing, I'll put another comma here, and it was primary ID, and it might just come up primary key, and in parentheses I think we can, I don't think we need a space, so I'll just put ID, and that's all we need for that, and that's indicating that ID is the primary key. So we have auto increment. And then also one other thing while we're in auto increment, just to point out, if you want to change the number so that it doesn't start with 0 and you just have ID 1, like if you had an ID number that should have like 6 digits or 3 digits, we'll do 3 digits. They have one here called alter table, and you just change the auto increment. You do it kind of after the fact. So I'm going to copy this. We'll throw this in as long as we're at this particular tab. And I'll put it, and it goes after the statements that we're doing here. So I'm going to put it after that parentheses and the semicolon. And I'll alter table characters, and if it's easier to copy this thing and paste this here, you could do that. Auto increment, I'll start with 101. 101 will be our first number of SpongeBob. And other things we're going to do here, we're going to put a default for our city, and I think we just have to put default, and then in quotes the name, like Bikini Bottom. And if you're not sure, which you're probably not, because you're wondering how did he know that, if you go here and you just look for default, and if you scroll down, you'll see it just has city varchar 255 default in capital letters like all our SQL code, and then it just says, it doesn't say equals or anything, it just says the city, and this one doesn't have a comma after it because it's the last one. And so that's all we did with Bikini Bottom. It doesn't have a comma. Actually, this one should have a comma because we have primary key after it. And one other thing we're going to do with gender is make it an enum. And that basically gives it a choice of something. So you only have a couple choices to put in here. And where you would find that would be kind of outside of here. It's actually under data types called an enum. And data types are, you know, the different things that columns could be. You know, they could be varchar, they could be integers, things like that. We're going to use enum, and it's pretty easy. You just say enum and then just give values that it can be. So I'm just going to copy this down here and go up here, and instead of varchar, I'm just going to put in enum, and I'm going to put male, female, and I could put other. If there's anybody, you know, like a computer or anything like that, you want to put other, like Karen, the computer. You could put other there if you're not sure, although that's Plankton's wife, so it could be female, but we're not sure since it's a computer. And I think we're okay with that. And what we're going to do is just check our commas. So everything should have a comma except for the last one. And right now, comma, 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 no comma there. And this is a statement that's after that. And it still ends in a semicolon. So I think we're okay. We have everything lowercase, ID, first, last, species, gender, city. And I think we're okay, and if we get an error, that's okay. And you might even want to copy this. Like every time you do this, you might just want to do like a Control-C or a Command-C if you're on a Mac. And then I'm just going to hit go, and this should create a table. And there it is. And it says it's empty because there's nothing in it yet, but it created a table, so that looks like it's okay. If you go to structure, you'll see the table. There it is. And there's nothing in it. So I'm going to go SQL, and we're going to create a table. Now we could create it from SQL, or you could go to insert, and this may help first because it'll kind of give you the code of how to do this, but we're going to put in the first two, which are going to be SpongeBob and Patrick. So, and I'm going to leave out the ID because it's going to be auto incrementing, so I'm going to put in SpongeBob first, and you could put a capital B or a small b for SpongeBob. I think the appropriate is a capital B, and his last name is SquarePants, and his species is a sponge. And you can see I did this before, and we'll make him male and leave Bikini Bottom alone. And then I'll do one more here, and I'll do Patrick, and his last name is Star, and he is a starfish, and he's also male. And then we'll just hit go. I think we're okay. We'll hit go, and it should put 2 in. And one thing I just want you to see here, that once you do this, it shows you the code that you just did. Now we did it kind of through the phpMyAdmin tools, but it actually, this is the SQL code that actually does an insert into, and it's good to kind of look at this here. And so that if we lose this, which I did the first time I recorded this, that's why I'm recording it a second time, we can put this in ourselves. Now notice what it's doing. It's saying insert into, and it says ex6-SpongeBob dot characters. Now you don't need these little slash things, but it does put that in when you do this through phpMyAdmin, so that's okay. And you probably wouldn't even have to put that ex6-SpongeBob dot characters, but that's what it's doing right now. It's showing you that it's the characters table within the SpongeBob database, so that's okay. Because I think if you go to insert into, let me just double check up here. Here's insert into. I don't think it always, it just says insert into table name, so it doesn't always show you the database, but it is doing it here. Just to take a look at this, here's a try it yourself. We may need this. It says insert into, then it shows the table, and then it shows the field names, and then it shows values, and then these are all the values that are going to be added when you add something to the database. And we're not going to do it exactly like this, but let's go back to here, and what I'll do is I'm going to copy this. So when I do it again, I can use this. So I'm going to copy that, and I'll just go back to SQL, which will bring me the same kind of window. And we'll put two more, except we'll use this SQL code. So I'll go here, and this comes up, and I'll just paste it right in here. And I'll do it the way it's doing it here with the dot, since that's what I pasted here. So I'll leave that in there. And it's doing ID, first, last. Those are the columns or the fields, and then the values. And I'm even going to put a return here, just so it's easier to see. And you can see they're putting bikini bottom in, even though we didn't put that in. They're putting it in, leaving it in there as a default, and they're putting null in, even though we said not null. They're putting not null in here because we're not putting it in, so it's going to put in the number itself. So I'm going to put two more here. I'm going to put Sandy Cheeks. So I'll put Sandy, and I'll put Cheeks, and she is a squirrel, and she's female, so I'll put an F there. And then for this one, I'll put Squidward, because he's kind of the next of the popular crew, Squidward, and his last name is Tentacles, and he is an octopus, not a squid, as you would think. Look it up, you'll see. And we'll keep him as male, and we'll keep him as bikini bottom. And I'm even going to copy this. And one thing I just want to notice, because I lost it before, and then I was rewriting it, and some things I forgot. Notice it, if you're doing more than one value, it's doing values, and there's two groups. It does put a comma in between, and then it does a semicolon at the end. And I'm also curious if we didn't put in null and we didn't put in bikini bottom, if it would still do that. So I might try that for the next time, just to see what happens. Even if we get an error, that's okay. So I changed this here, and I'm going to copy it just in case I need it. So it never hurts to copy it. And I'm just going to hit go. And I should have two more added to our database. And it says 2 rows inserted. I'll go to browse, check it out. And there we have 4, and there's 101, 102, 103, 104. There's our database, and there's all the people in it. And I'll go back here, and I'll go to SQL. Now again, you could do insert. That's the way to do it through phpMyAdmin. But if you were going to do it through code from a web page, you'd have to do it the way we did it with SQL. So I'm going to go to SQL, and I'm just going to paste this. And it's doing that select into, and we'll do 2 more. And one thing, just to experiment, I'm going to remove null and just see what happens, because they don't show null. And I'm going to remove bikini bottom just in case, since we're not adding bikini bottom. Maybe I'm just curious if it'll make it blank, and if not, we could just put it back in. So it's not a big deal here, but I just want to see what happens. So we do have a comma after that first one, so we're actually putting in just 4 values. The ID should get put in there automatically. I'm just experimenting to see what happens if we don't put null and we don't put bikini bottom, even though we're saying city and we're saying ID. So we may get an error, but let's just see what happens. And I'm going to copy this just in case we have to change it again. And I'll do this too. I'll get rid of the database name and just use characters, because I think that's all we need. And I'll copy this again. And I'll hit go, and I got an error. It says column count doesn't match. Okay, so it didn't like that we didn't put this in, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we didn't put that in. So The default's bikini bottom. Let's just put in null here and see what happens there. And a comma. Maybe we just need the null, or maybe we need both. And I'll just copy that again and hit go. And we got an error again. Same thing, column count. So that answers our question. We do have to keep the same column count. Even though when we fill out the insert, we don't always have to put some, we could leave some blank. Here we actually have to put it in. I'm going to put in a comma bikini bottom since we're doing the code. I'll do that. And remember, bikini bottom should have the quotes on them. And I'll copy the comma, the space, and the bikini bottom. And I'll put it here. And it's good to know. It's good to try out that stuff just so we know, because it helps you understand it a little bit better. And I'll copy this. And this time it should go, I'm guessing, that we now have our columns matched up. We're putting in Sandy and Squidward tentacles. And I thought we put them in already. And actually, that would have put them in again, which isn't good. So we're going to change these. I didn't mean to use the same people. But at least that little test told us that we had to have null and we had to have bikini bottom. So now I'm going to put in two more. I'll put in Krabs. I'll put in Eugene Krabs, last name Krabs. And he is a crab, and he's male. And then I'll do his daughter, Pearl, and her name is Krabs. And she is a whale, and she's female. So I'll copy this just to make sure if there's any problem, I can paste it again. And I'll hit go. And it should have inserted two more rows. And if I go to browse, there's my two more rows. And there's Krabs and Pearl. So I have 6. So that's what I want right now. And that's all you need for EX6. That should be good. We want to just have our database set up because we're going to be adding more to these from our website. So we're going to be doing that. But I just want to have at least 6 set up right now. And I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of do it from using insert here, which I just want to kind of get out of. And you could just go back to browse if you don't do this. And we also did it from SQL where we did insert into. So we were doing this, and they even have some things here that you can try out. They have this insert into, so they even have some things to kind of start you out here, which I didn't even tell you about yet, but that is a nice way to kind of start it out. Insert characters, and it actually puts all your values there. It's putting them in little blocks. It's not putting the quotes on them, but I think that's just kind of giving you an idea of where they should go. So, and it's telling you how many there should be. So that's kind of a nice thing to be aware of. I'll clear that out for now. So that's good for EX6. So that's all you have to do for EX6 is create your table with at least 6 characters in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move on to EX7, which is going to be actually working on our, if you look here, EX7 is going to be working on an index HTML page. I'll open this up, which is actually going to be, we're going to create a form in here, and we're going to just write some information from our form to the page. And then for the next part of it, then we'll write it from the form, and we'll actually put it into the database. So we'll take information, we'll make a little form that we can insert new characters into the database. Instead of doing it here, we'll be able to do it right from a website, which is the way you want to be able to do things to create a web-based database. So we'll work on that in the next part of this video. So that's EX6, and that's our SpongeBob database.